Good evening. Tonight we are opening up our school committee workshop, the joint workshop with our committee and the two towns' boards of selectmen, and we'll call the workshop to order at 5:34 p.m. And what our intention here is to just kind of start going over the regional agreement. We did start this process last year, right about this time last year. Yes. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting for the town of Harwich with the Chatham Board of Selectmen and the Regional School Committee to order.
Thank you. So again, we're here to just kind of go over the process of the regional agreement. And this was the original regional agreement that we all voted in December 2010. And part of what we have done thus far is we've gone through a lot of it in terms of just what's not applicable anymore. And so what I think would be the best process to do is to almost go page by page and just go through what we're thinking of taking out of the agreement, and then a couple of verbiage changes to add into the agreement. And then there are some parts that we are still wrestling with in terms of what would be the best solution to add to the agreement itself. The school committee has met, and we've met with our attorneys, and they've gone through it. And what you have in front of you is the draft that we are currently working on. This is not what we are ready to present to the selectmen and to the towns for the town meeting vote. This is still in draft form. It's still what we are, like I said, we're still wrestling with different parts of it. So if everybody's okay with it, I actually would like to go through it, and then we'll kind of skip over the three major parts that we're looking to still wrestle with the wording. Does that sound okay? All right, so at the top, the first paragraph, just changing the tense to have a desire to actually having created it. The next paragraph down for name and composition, the original regional agreement, we didn't have Monomoy yet. We were still just a region. So it's just updating it to add Monomoy Regional School District. The top of page 2, again, there's parts that were initial portions for the region, for the school committee, that are no longer needed in the agreement. Subheading D, length of terms. It felt that it was needed. The attorneys in our conversation was that it would be important to add in there unless the member has otherwise vacated their seat. Again, initial staggering of terms is unnecessary. Under vacancies, just a little bit of a verbiage change. The bottom of page 2, powers of the committee, unnecessary from the interim period. Moving on to page 3, the example of the first year of the district. It's unnecessary to have that portion in there. Under subheading E, the regional school district school committee shall elect. We added in the word appoint because our secretary is actually an appointed secretary for our committee. So just verbiage added in there. And if you have any questions, please stop me in the middle. Don't let me keep going all the way through. On to page 4. Under subheading section 5 for location, letter B, that's unnecessary. We have built the new high school, and we have dealt with the middle school. Section C on page 4, that's one of the portions that is still being wrestled with. There's nothing definite there, so I'm actually going to skip over that and just finish up the basic stuff, and we'll come back to that one. On to page 5, just adding the word regional in at the top. Under the heading F, again, unnecessary, as we have already dealt with the middle school and the high school land. Under G, again, that's transition period. Moving on to page 6, So this is dealing with the budget, and under the Regional School District Committee shall prepare a budget. Number 1, it's adding in the verbiage that the district shall submit its proposed budget to the Selectmen and Finance Committee of each member town and provide a copy to each member town's public library and town clerk's office for posting. And that is not a change in a sense of what is done. It's just in terms of making sure that, I'm just reading just making sure the verbiage is more clear on where it actually gets given to every year on the budget. Moving down to number 2, that paragraph talks about how we present the budget to you in terms of all of the itemized sections that we provide, and that's what we currently do. And because it's a regional agreement, we wanted to make sure that if we, between you guys and us, decide together that you want it in a different format, or if a different format's required by the state, that sentence in there allows us to be a little bit different. That way we're not being held to our regional agreement to make sure it's done with those categories. Moving on to page 7. Again, that's just protecting in case the laws change. It's just that's our lawyer putting in there, in case the laws change, we're covered for that section of the budget approval and disapproval. On to page 8 for number 3 under operating costs. Right now, this is what we've actually been doing, the October 1 DESE numbers. It's just specifying that those are the numbers that we're going to use. And a little bit of clarity with the most recent past 3 years, adding in those words. Moving down to capital costs, that's another section that that's actually that large paragraph of capital costs for under B. That is just defining capital costs and what capital costs can be related to. So that part is more or less just verbiage and explaining things out. The next paragraph down where it says capital costs, and then it's underlined that are attributable to the facilities under the custody, that's something that we do want to talk about, so we'll come back to that piece as well. And then moving on to page 9. At the top, again, it's specifying the October 1 DESE enrollment figures. And then moving into the debt service, section B, that's another portion that we wanted to discuss and talk about, so we'll come back to that. Section E is all describing different ways to split up the debt service, which, again, that's what we're going to come back to discuss. Section F, this is just a cleanup in terms of what the practice has actually become, because that's what the towns have requested, is instead of having the first business day in 5 equal installments, these are the dates and the months that the towns have both requested for Chatham at the bottom of page 9 and then Harwich at the top of page 10. Page 11, the cross-out section is dealing with the transition, so that's no longer needed. Page 12, section 20 is the beginning of the end in terms of the transition period. So from page 12 to the end, all of that is the transition and the interim regional school committee. So I'm not sure if you guys remember, but I believe starting in January of 2011, there was a interim regional school committee appointed, and this was all dealing with them. Our full regional school committee did not begin until July 1st, I believe, 2011. I could be wrong on the date, but it was July 2011. So that last page 12, 13, and 14 to the top of page 15 is all that transitional interim school committee. And then the names on the end of page 15 are all the people who originally signed it. Any questions on any of the basic stuff? Okay. All right, so then let's go back to page 4. We'll start with the doozy first. So the original regional agreement oh, there it is. So the original agreement said, the first sentence in black, there shall be no less than one elementary school in each member town. And then the last sentence on the bottom of page 4, students in the elementary grades shall attend schools in their towns of residence except in special cases as defined by the regional district school committee. So the wording that we have kind of come up with as a placeholder and a starting point is to add in the regional district school committee as it determines to be in the best interest of the district students may assign students to elementary schools based on factors including, but not limited to, town of residence, geographic proximity to a school, i.e. districting, grade configuration, curricular structure, student population, and the temporary or permanent unavailability of one or more buildings, in whole or in part for its intended purpose due to circumstances such as natural disaster, failure of systems, or other similar circumstances. And this has been a conversation that Mr. Carpenter has brought up with us as a school committee. It was been almost a year ago that we started having the conversation, just trying to wrestle with the population of Chatham Elementary and Harwich Elementary and the number of students that are in each one, and where it's going to be going as a district, where it's going to be going forward, where it's been historically, and how those populations have come to be historically. Mr. Carpenter, do you want to do a brief, more detailed than...
Sure, I guess the history of it, looking at, we'll call it unintended things or maybe unforeseen aspects of regionalization. When I came to the district, we were in two very different places in our two different towns. So Chatham had traditionally maintained relatively small class sizes in the neighborhood of 14 students in each class. I had 3 sections at each grade level, so so there'd be roughly three sections of 14 in kindergarten. But of those 14 students, roughly a third of them were coming choiced in from other towns, predominantly coming choiced in from Harwich. Harwich, at the time when we started, was operating under a different sort of way. Harwich, I think, as more of a survival strategy, had been opening its doors widely to choice, and the largest class sizes in the school district were actually in the lower grade levels in Harwich. So your kindergarten, first, second grades had in the low 20s to upwards 24, 25 students in them. And I think the mentality was that over time, after students would leave the district through choice, that down the road you'd have enough kids to have a large enough senior class population. Well, from an educational standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have the classes that you're supposed to, as from education, have the smallest, most nurturing, are those kindergarten 1, 2, be the largest in the district. So what we've done when I came in my first year, I had to kind of go with what we had. But as we went into the second year, we started to shut down accepting school choice students into Harwich Elementary School, let families know you can choice over to Chatham Elementary, and have effectively gotten the Harwich Elementary class sizes down to what we've been shooting for at the district, is having elementary class sizes of 18 plus or minus 1 all grade levels, and we're there. So 4 years, 5 now, or 5th year later, that's what our elementary classes look like in both elementary schools. Some of the challenges, though, is that in doing this, we've seen a few more students come over initially to Chatham Elementary School, so we were having class sizes that were roughly the same in both elementary schools. But as time's gone on, the drive for Harwich families to look towards Chatham Elementary was smaller class sizes. Well, I think I've done a good job of equalizing the class sizes between the two buildings, so the draw of smaller class sizes at Chatham Elementary isn't there, and the draw of what comes after elementary school in Chatham is not there either, because kids from both schools go to the same middle school, go to the same high school. So what we've been seeing over the last couple of years is fewer and fewer families from Harwich looking towards Chatham, because they can get the exact same experience at Harwich Elementary School, same curriculum, same middle school, high school that's coming next. So what we've been doing to try to offset that in recent years is inviting families from Harwich Elementary School, particularly the kindergartners, to say, hey, come tour Chatham Elementary School, give them a tour of the building, and let them see if this is a place that they'd want to go. We had this year, I believe we had about 70 families expressed interest. Of those 17 families from Harwich, I think 11 of them showed up for a tour. After 11 toured, 8 of those said, hey, we'd be interested in going. But when we looked at the numbers of what we have at the kindergarten level at Chatham Elementary School, it would have had us have 3 sections of kindergarten at Chatham Elementary School of roughly 13 students. And we would have had 5 kindergarten sections at Harwich Elementary School of about 21 students in them. So to have class sizes of 21 at Harwich Elementary School and class sizes of 13 in Chatham didn't make sense. So what we did is we looked at how do we get to that 18 plus or minus 1 number. So we did a lottery, had 3 families from Harwich come to Chatham Elementary, so that Chatham Elementary has about 35 kindergartners at it now. Class size is 17 and a half. Told 5 of those Harwich families, we need you to stay in Harwich, and actually took one of the teachers from Chatham Elementary School and sent them to Harwich, so that we have 2 sections of kindergarten at Chatham Elementary, 6 at Harwich, and both of them, one school has class sizes now of 17 and a half at Chatham and roughly 18 at Harwich. So we have that balance there. But this becomes sort of the beginning of what we can kind of project out in future years. I've worked with both clerks in both towns and looked at the births from the current year, all the way back for the last decade or so. What we see in Harwich is a pretty stable number of youth out there. And what we see in Chatham is there's been a slight decline over the last decade, and it looks like it might be leveling off. But there's not anything out there to go and say that we're going to have more than 2 classrooms worth of elementary students at any one grade level at Chatham Elementary School. So I've raised with the committee, and I've raised with parents in both of our elementary schools, and also have gone to early childhood meetings to go and talk to parents who are not yet with the district, just to go and say, hey, we're at this point where we have to kind of look at what's right in terms of education at the elementary level. If we look at Chatham Elementary School, and Chatham has, if we go back, and those of you who have been in Chatham your whole life, you may have had a cohort that had 1 grade level. I mean, it's had times where there's been 1 grade level, 2 classes, 3 classes, but I think it comes down to what makes good sense for kids at Chatham Elementary School. And if we look at the current kindergarten population at Chatham Elementary School, if you're a boy there, there are 11 other boys that you have to connect and play with at your age level, and I think that many families are kind of indicating that it would be nice to have some more peers to interact with. What we struggle with on Harwich's side is without even bringing in choice families from any other town, there's enough youth in Harwich, if we keep our class sizes at that 18 plus or minus 1, to have Harwich Elementary School filled. The challenge is Harwich Elementary School is sort of like one classroom short of ideal to have. It has always had, before I got here, one of the grades, it was always the fourth grade, was just sort of doubled up in some way, so that there was 6 sections of kindergarten through 3rd, and then only 5 in 4th grade because there's just not enough rooms. So we're at this place where Chatham Elementary could continue as it will be, and if it has 2 kindergartens this year, next year it's going to have 2 first grades and 2 second, 2 third as we go off into the years. And have one building really small and the other building running, I'd argue, as one of the largest school districts on the Cape, or largest elementary schools on the Cape, and really running maybe over capacity. And I think it would benefit both buildings to see potentially a shift of some of the students at Harwich Elementary School to have 3 sections in one building, have that building have more peer group, a larger peer group for kids, and see Harwich Elementary actually shrink and become a little more intimate than what it currently is. So we've discussed some different options on the table. One of them is let the status quo be. Chatham Elementary gets small, Harwich Elementary sort of bursting at the seams, and just kind of go forward for the next 5 years that way. Or to look at taking a portion of Harwich, shifting what would amount to 1 busload of students to Chatham Elementary, to have Chatham Elementary have 3 sections per grade level, and to see Harwich then shrink a little bit to have 5 sections per grade level. And then we've talked about a third option that we could look as a district, which other communities like Brewster or Sandwich or Barnstable have, where they have upper and lower elementary schools, where all of your students at a grade level go to one elementary school. So you'd see potentially Harwich Elementary becoming a pre-K, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and Chatham be the school that students go to for 3rd grade and 4th grade. It has some wonderful advantages in terms of balancing class size and having all your teachers in the same building, teaching the same grade, so it helps in terms of curriculum delivery and coordination. It provides the maximum social groups for kids. They're far more likely to find somebody with their same interests in a bigger population. I think it allows us to do a lot of things extracurricularly, but it has a cost that's above and beyond what we've been doing. We potentially have to have another tier of busing happen. We might have to do some construction in the buildings to add some bathrooms in classrooms where the younger kids are. So there's 3 different options that I've talked with people about and have reached out and solicited input. We've got we put a survey out there. We had 453 people respond back to the survey, and it may be no shock, but there wasn't one thing that people were gravitating towards, and there's a little difference between how parents, particularly from Chatham, responded to the survey versus parents from Harwich. I think the parents from Chatham, the option that they prefer the most is the status quo, but actually more of them are saying that they would want to see some sort of change. They're just sort of split as to what that change would look like. From Harwich, most of them, or the bulk of them, were expressed that they'd like to see that third option where you have upper and lower. But again, there's a significant number that are saying they'd want to see that status quo maintained too. So,
Thank you. Yes.
I'm confused, looking at this, because it looks like you're taking a particular experience and you're changing the entire process because that's the rationale. I would dare say, at Board of Selectmen reach now, that every one of us feels like, we didn't have to go to town meeting, we can make these decisions ourselves. But one of the beauties and the elegance of the system is that we do have town meetings. You're changing the entire agreement, and they simply say your sole discretion, here on forward, anything gets changed. It's changed within the school district, and the citizens don't get to opine to change the agreement, because you're preemptively changing it. And one of the things that concerns me about that is, for the regional school system, it's a top budget item, so we don't have that leverage to say, okay, we know the school committee feels strongly about this, we're not too sure if we're going to turn enough for that, so we're going to hold you to this budget until we know more about this. That's wrong. You don't have that leverage. So pretty much the only thing that allows the average citizen in both of these towns to give an opinion about the fundamental change of the agreement is by going back to a town meeting and having that discussion. And you were very persuasive. Now, I would assume you could persuade each of the towns to do that kind of change. But why would we change the entire agreement to accommodate it from here on forward? We don't ever get to do that again.
I don't think in any way, shape, or form that that's taking away the ability to go change the agreement forward. In fact, the agreement basically says that it says that you're supposed to.
That's what I'll say in the beginning, it's sole discretion of them, because that's the way it reads.
But the agreement's one that gets revisited every 5 years. That's how the process is supposed to work.
Here, where this is not going to be coming back to change.
Well, this is just referring to how we potentially look at elementary education is the one clause that the school committee's coming to. And as I've raised in every parent group I've gone to, I said, here are 3 options. At the end of the day, this isn't my choice. I do vote in Chatham, but at the end of the day, it's the voters who determine whether or not the regional agreement changes, not me.
Not on this end. This is a significant change. It pulls the public out of this opportunity in this area.
So I can kind of attack to that. Because we're trying to regionalize and combine Chatham and Howard before, the deal was we had one high school with 2 communities and one middle school. And then originally we had elementary school, one for Howard and one for Chatham. And that was written into this. Don says, this takes that out of it. And I guess I agree with Don. I would somewhere just like to have some assurance that there's still an influence of these towns in this agreement, which just takes out of that.
So you guys are directing everything to Mr. Carpenter, and it's not just him. It's all of us that this is kind of where we've come up with, and
maybe I can restate that. Because there's some conflict, there are some people who want for the agreement to regionalize. Mm-hmm. And part of to make people feel more comfortable is that we said we would have a Howard elementary school for Howard residents and elementary school for Chatham. Now, Scott said there's reasons to rethink that and make some options. Mm-hmm. My concern is that this opens that up so you folks can do whatever you want. But I think, 4 years into the school now, I think the select boards will still want to have some say on which one of the options, or how do we assure that we have to move it entirely away from Harwich and Chatham individual interests. It's just like move away from that. Because this does give all the options. The regional agreement gives all the options. You focus on which of the 3 options you want to give. And that's okay. I think if you've got that, I think the town should have, as Don says, at least some input into that.
Well, ideally, if anything comes up, it's not going to be the 8 of us sitting around saying, you know what, this is what we decide. We're not listening to anybody. I mean, the whole point of any decisions that we make is, getting feedback from the families, and we have a survey that we're going to go through the results at our meeting, and having conversations and having public forums, and going through all of that portion. It's looking at it as a option for the school committee to wrestle with and look at and get input. You know, we're elected officials. We're not just up here to listen to ourselves. We have to listen to everybody and get it. And I understand the point of wanting to get the town's, I guess, blessing for any change that was made in this section. And, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't think it needs to be just us or just, you know, something along that lines. But like I said, this is still a working, trying to figure out the best way to look at a possible change in the future. We're not looking at a change to revamp everything next school year. It's trying to figure it out.
So, if we were to move this document to town meeting, and the voters voted in favor of it, then there'd be a discretion of the school committee to decide on option A, B, or C.
Or E or F or G.
You're in, yeah,
Yes,
outside of the town meeting form.
correct.
That's what we're ready.
Yes. Mr. Russell? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, because I know from Shadow's perspective, I know one component that, that I'm, conscious of is, as a community, we have a lot of our regulatory and advisory boards that are working on for housing, the recognition of veteran and their families into the community, how can we make them afford the community, and we're conscious of step forward currently now to address that. So we don't know where that population students may go. I understand we don't have your opening to discuss this now. But there is no crystal ball, so we don't know in 5 years or 10 years where we might be with all these initiatives that the town is taking that we might actually have more students coming in that more programs. We don't. But I think we can bring the town meeting component that input right up.
Mr. Russell?
It's probably going to try to repeat myself, but as I saw this a year ago, and I appreciate the fact that some of you guys were on the original document, and the two elementaries being included in the region presented a challenge, and I think it was quietly just left the way it was. We're really just vision thinking the next 2 or 3 or 4 years out. Probably nothing will happen no matter what we do in the next couple of years. But forget option 2 or 3. Here's where I fall on logic. Now that we're a region, we have a staff that's paid equally for their years of service, whether they're in Howard's first grade or Chatham first grade. If we did nothing, and right now the document doesn't give the school committee or any authority, it stays what it is, and we just watched Chatham Elementary demographically go from 3 to 2 sections per grade. But then the 2 sections start to shrink into 12 youngsters in a class. And we seek out volunteers, which usually most school systems never do that. And we see this trend, which may or may not happen, but that's what we're conversing about. There is absolutely no way with parity or fairness, and I speak now from Howard's viewpoint, that we're sending 76 cents on the dollar to pay Chatham-assigned elementary teachers with 10 or 11 youngsters versus Howard elementary teachers getting the exact same pay, having 18 or 19 or 20 children. So what would a superintendent in another region or a larger town, Barnstable, do? They would sit like this and discuss that Centerville Elementary, next year, needs to move 2 streets over because Osterville Elementary is losing 100 youngsters. They'd have parent meetings affecting those 2 villages, and I know it's different. And why? For parity. For the fact that there's a student-teacher ratio fairness at 25 to 1, 20 to 1, whatever. It may never happen, but we're seeing trends that Chatham classes, K through 3, 4, if it got and stays at that level, someone would say, well, Chatham, before region, was always a tiny, nice little school. Those days hopefully can continue, but not at the expense at the youngsters going to Howard Elementary. So therefore, Scott, 2 or 3 years ago, tried to work it out to be 18 each. That's what we've been. The last year, we're seeing that possibly that too. If it ever came to 1 section, something would have to be done by somebody, and I don't think you could run it yearly at a town meeting. votes who would like to see another section with, say, some streets in Howard being affected, and moves 50 youngsters over, keep the number at 17 each, or whatever we choose to. So that's why, I think that's why the discussion's here. I wouldn't jump to option 2 or 3 that needs more attention, but the fact that some authority, beginning with, I think, the school committee, needs the discretion to identify that potential problem, come forward with a plan, and have it in the region that says some authority, the school committee, via the superintendent and his agents, that would begin to present options to make the parity of the kids in those 2 elementary schools close to fairness. That's how I see it.
I saw somebody down there.
I was simply going to ask if this agreement had to go to town meeting, and it does, over section.
Yes.
But it won't be this gets changed.
This agreement, no, any change for this agreement has to go to town meeting.
Once this does that, it permanently delegates that authority.
For this
We
spec-
need to go back to town meeting for any reconstruction of that issue schemes.
for elementary schools, correct.
Okay, but that's what I
Correct.
want to get clear, because once this gets voted, we will never see Plan A again in the town meeting in this section.
Unless it is deemed at any point that it wants to be changed back or to some other format, and therefore, it doesn't have to be reviewed, it doesn't have to wait 5 years. It can be brought up at every town meeting if we want to. If there's something in here that's just not working, we could decide as a body here to say, we'd like to change this sentence, bring it to both boards. You both have to agree to change that sentence. Has to be approved by the Attorney General and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and be approved by town meeting for anything to change in this document.
That's what I'm grappling with. Why would you ever come to that conclusion if you've already been pre-delegated all the authority in this area, and the town meeting is no longer involved
Well, there's going to be possible changes in the future.
in
It's,
this area?
there could. I'm not saying what's going to happen in 5 years. 5 years from now, it could be a completely different board, and they feel something totally different than what we feel. Yes,
So for clarification, 5 years, we're coming back every 5 years.
at least. We're required legally.
So if parents aren't happy with what's going on in the schools, then have the opportunity to start talking about it in 4 to 5 years.
But you see, that doesn't get to this.
But it can be changed. It's not that it can't be changed.
Yes.
So I agree with Terry as far as this falling on the school committee to present options. I don't see the need really to take the Board of Selectmen out of this. I mean, if you guys as a working group, I guess first, was this a subcommittee that made these changes?
The whole committee. It was a consensus of the whole committee.
So, if the Board of Selectmen aren't comfortable with this, there's really no reason why the school committee can't present options. And then we have another meeting like this and agree on options.
That's exactly.
Obviously,
This
this
is
is a
workshop
proposal.
number 1
Right.
of us working together. We did start the process last year. It kind of fizzled because it really was, it just didn't, it fizzled.
So just,
Bottom line there,
just
this
for-
is,
For Don, this is really just this is a proposal, obviously. It's a proposal, but this is the first step for conversation. So this isn't something we're voting on.
no, we have not voted on this to say this is not the document we're presenting to you. This is the draft that we have been working on. A lot of it, as we went through, a lot of it is just verbiage and taking things out. So once we're clear on that portion, we can focus on the parts that we know are going to, like I said, these require a lot of discussion. That's why I kind of skipped these.
And I would argue that in the spirit of the regionalization and what we all agreed on to begin with, there's really no reason why the school committee can't present options if they have joint meetings. There's no reason to take the Board of Selectmen out and give control over this elementary school. I'll be interested to see the survey that Scott did with the parents, kind of see where they are, because we've all.
You're welcome to take the pile and just pass it out. It's right there.
We've all had received phone calls in the past week and a half from our elementary school parents concerning if we would consider taking ourselves out of it. And it has been about a 50-50 split on changes, at least conversations I've had about redistricting versus sending streets. But to Scott's argument, I believe that what you were doing was working. I mean, if 13 families that wanted to go, and you could only pick 5. It seems that the voluntary, I want to go to Chatham,
No, not-
seems to have been working so far.
No, it was 13 who thought about it. 13 of them went to the, or 15 went to, went.
You could only take so many.
Well, no, it's so
There wasn't enough to support
Right.
3 sections. You know, so-
13 or 15 said, hey, that sounds like an interesting option, let me go check it out. They went to check it out, they came back and they said, yeah, you know what, only 5 of them said, I want to do it. And so from there, the 5 was tough. Dean, Mr. Castro, sorry.
I just think what we're trying to do is, I think, depend on distinguishing between the process of getting approval of any changes to this agreement and the content or substance of what's going to be in this section, which is what Mr. Carl and the letters are talking about. And reduce it down to, I think, central issue, whatever Terry said, is a sentiment among the boards of selectmen or members of the boards of selectmen, such that there should be a qualification inserted in this proposed PC that subjects the discretion of the school committee to requiring the approval of town meeting, the boards of selectmen. I think that's the issue. That who presents this? Does the school committee present this to the parents?
We will present this to the 2 boards,
We're going to
and
have
then,
to take it to town meeting.
correct.
These changes. And whether you're going to present it as is, or whether it's going to contain a requirement that the discretion, if you want to confer upon the school committee, and I understand Terry's argument for that, is subjected to an obligation that the change that you're proposing, district thing or whatever, requires approval of the town meeting before you select on a vote. That's really the issue.
Mr. Duvall?
I just, when we started this process, nobody anticipated that the group of families that would send their children to Chatham would cease to do that. We wouldn't be having this conversation if that was still part of the equation, because we would still have the class sizes in Chatham for 3 classrooms for the grade level. And that's why we were able to say in the original agreement, the children would stay in the town that they lived in. Well, things have changed.
How did you go about inviting Chatham, Howard parents to consider going to sending their kids to Chatham?
So every year, the principal of Harwich Elementary School sends out a letter to all of the Harwich Elementary families, particularly kindergarten families, and when they meet with them, they discuss the Chatham Elementary option, and so we have a set of families each year who indicate that they'd be interested, and I'd say, and I think we see this in a lot of different situations where if they had an older sibling go, they're far more likely to be looking at Chatham Elementary, and so I think some of the worries I have is that as time goes on, as fewer choice over, you have fewer older siblings, and so there's a lot of factors that are sort of pulling it so that there's not as many families each year to go keep that, to have a number say we want to come to merit that third section at Chatham Elementary. But it's also abundantly clear when I go to parent meetings that the parents so we have 77% of parents at Harwich Elementary are indicating in the survey and parent conversations I've had that there's some sort of relief needed in that building in terms of space, just size. It's the largest elementary school of its sort on the Cape, and it's a big school. And the other concern I have is, we don't open this agreement for 5 more years. 5 years from now, Chatham Elementary will be very small compared to what it is today. And I think that that's, on some level, it's okay. You know, it can operate small, but one building's going to be very small and the other building's going to be bursting at the seams. And you know, I think it's up to this body here as the school committee to go and say, is that in the best educational sense for kids? Alan, could you open the door there? I think there was somebody trying to get in. Thank you.
What I was getting at is that whether everyone is invited to consider going. It sounds like they are invited, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Child is ready to go to kindergarten.
Right.
So that, those parents of that child may not be aware of the issues concerning the size of Howard School or other. Seems to me that's a factor driving concerns on the part of people who have their children already in Howard Elementary School. Maybe it's the fact of someone's contemplating whether to send child and take it.
They can choose to go later years too. So, yes, it's not just, you can only choose it in kindergarten.
Ms. Brown?
Years, in like the last 3 or 4 years, they did not allow that.
No, we've always had choice over from Harwich. So, you know, so before we came together as a district, the choice was just part of Chatham Elementary's incoming, inter-district school choice. Since we've come together as a region, we've had intra-district choice, and that's what's helped us keep 3 sections going at Chatham Elementary. It's just sort of the phenomena that the more we equalize things in terms of curriculum and experiences between the 2 elementary schools, which is what we're supposed to do as a region, the pressure from Harwich to kind of seek out Chatham is becoming less, and then we don't have enough.
Did you see a drastic decline in Harwich interest this year as opposed to last year? I'm getting at the time change.
Not necessarily. It was, you know, we were sort of on that cusp where there was almost enough to have, you know, we're getting close to have that extra section, but there were so many students still left at Harwich Elementary School that the simple math of it was it made more sense for us in terms of equalizing class size at the kindergarten level to move a teacher rather than move the students.
But there was no decline this year in interest?
Maybe just a little bit. Yeah.
Because I think that the time change is a big deal. People like me, for instance, I definitely sent my son to Chatham Elementary, but I have a middle school daughter. I get leave her home alone. And I, for some reason, recall it not being an option when he was younger. I don't know what happens. I'm going to have to go back and.
It was always an option.
It was always an option.
Yep.
It may
He
not
can
have
still go.
been pushed. It may not have been like, hey, did you ever check this out? And that type of thing. That's how it's been.
I mean, we have particularly the last 2 years gotten much more assertive on our end, trying. You know, it's sort of like trying to engineer it, and the outreach that we're doing isn't enough to voluntarily stabilize the situation, which is why we're here. If we could voluntarily do it, it'd be no problem.
And 8.
Comments and maybe some insight, but when the agreement was originally drafted, the board approved it, the vision was having elementary school in each town, and that we would, the students from each town would attend that elementary school. Times change, and I'm a little confused as to why, if we have a burgeoning Harwich Elementary, why there is more interest in attending a smaller school that has attracting at least 13 to 14 students, so we can man another classroom, fill another class in Chatham. So I'm a little confused as to, we're so full, why wouldn't there be a market push to want to go out to Chatham and attend potentially a small school? Philosophically, I think what some folks are struggling with, which I'm not going to struggle with, I don't think, is times change. And if we have an issue that needs to be addressed, I think it's the purview of the school committee, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to run our schools, we're supposed to allocate resources, we're supposed to think presently about what's best for our students. And philosophically, in my mind, a small school is great, but one of the reasons why we regionalized was to broaden the perspective and give our students greater contact points, more diversity, and to have the experience of perhaps a little larger school. I went to really small schools throughout my career, and they were great. But every once in a while, I think it's good to have more diversity in the kids, as I think we've heard some parents articulate. I don't have an issue at all with amending this agreement and having town meeting vote that amendment with all the facts in front. Then we have to look at this every 5 years, do we not? By maybe number 1 or 2. And you can bring an amendment if something blew up and was really unpalatable. Citizens can petition to amend this agreement and intervene in 5 years. If something really went untoward and folks, parents in particular, really got upset, they could bring a citizen's petition to amend the agreement. So it's not like it's etched in stone. Now, I understand it changes, town meeting changes, Stasis kind of moves in, but this agreement could be amended in the intervening 5 years. So philosophically, I don't know where you're going to land here, and I'm not reading this language in Section 5C as the gospel, whether it's A, B, or C, or option 1, 2, or 3, I don't know. But what I hear you asking is for the discretion, the ability, the authority, if you will, to rejigger the students between towns, as I think, honestly, is your purview as a school committee. That's what we hire you to do. That's why we have a professional superintendent. That's why we have a school committee to make those decisions on behalf of our schools. So I per se don't have an issue with the sentiment of this language.
Good.
I was going to let Ms. Stout speak. She hasn't spoken yet.
Please.
Ms. Stout?
Well, we haven't taken a vote, and so this is not a unanimous thing from the school committee. And having been a teacher at Chatham Elementary and at Harwich Elementary, I am, as an individual, not in favor of either of these plans, of forcing children from Harwich to go to Chatham, or definitely not of the upper and lower school. We have not yet tried having an extra bus to go to pick kids around Harwich. That may be one of the reasons is that they would like to have a bus pick them up, and having something simple like that. I've heard a lot of what, as a counselor, I would say, as anxiety, projecting into the future of concern. And this is something that we have to bring up every 5 years, but there's nothing prohibiting us from bringing up every year. So if there's a change, we can bring it up next year or the following year. It's not something that we're forced to do right now. I think it's imperative that we begin this discussion. I think this is fabulous that we're beginning this. I recommended, or I suggested to my daughter that maybe my grandson from Harwich go over there because there's two great schools. They are very, very comparable. I don't feel like Harwich is busting by the seams or having more time in Chatham that 2 grade levels is a big problem. But I do think the idea of inviting children from Harwich and making it more palatable for people to want to go to Chatham is wonderful. And so for me personally, just as an individual person, I think that there are things like that we should try before our voters feel like, after 50 or 60 years of working towards this, that we're disregarding the promise we made to them. If it was at the children's expense, I would not be saying this, because I do feel like my obligation is to first work for the children, but I don't see them hurting. I think there is a concern, just like Scott said, that possibly there will be a problem, but I don't see that problem now. And for young children, the diversity in large schools do not matter. If you had one class or two classes in kindergarten, first, second, it gets a little bit more at third or fourth, where they like to have larger, but that is an issue at middle and high school to a different degree than it is at an elementary school. So that's just my 2 cents.
No, I just want to say, like, I reinforce the fact that I'm comfortable taking it away from the town meeting process, because each of our towns, I think, value our town meeting government system, so that is sacred. And to take this important component out of that discussion, I'm uncomfortable with. If we were to put this language, and this language were to move forward to each town meeting as presented, I got to throw it out there. You got to start selling it, because everyone's going to start asking. Okay, this language is here for a reason, and you've said in your coffee shop talks, I attended one of them, a couple weeks ago. Gee, what is going to happen? Are we going to do option 1 or 2 or 3? You guys are going to be asked flat out what's going to happen and when is it going to happen. So from marketing this, if this were the way that we're to go, what's going to happen? Because people are going to vote on it with the presumption that it might be, gee, this part of Harwich is going to have to go to Chatham. People may not like that. And I think there's some issues with it. I mean, the busing has a budgetary issue. With the routes and everything else. I personally like to know how many kids are actually riding on the buses, because if you've ever been to any of the pickup lines, they're not taking the bus. Sure. Yeah, and I got 4 kids in 3 different schools, so I know the pickup lines too well. But yeah, I'm just, right now, this is a document about how we want to proceed forward. Taking the town meeting component out of it is a concern with me, and that is basically what we're discussing procedurally right now. The contents of this is probably a little bit later discussion, but the procedure of how we want to move forward. So I think I've said my piece.
Mr. Russ?
A follow-up couple of thoughts. I don't see any purpose of excluding the selectmen or town meeting at all. That's not my point. I'm not certain on what our budget is, but is 36 million close to it? Yeah. I don't know a corporation that runs 36 million with a little portion, about a third or a half of the kids, being an extended invitation to solve a yearly problem. So either this school committee or the elected officials get something in this document that doesn't say option 1, 2, or 3, but has the freedom to look towards 3 years, make a solution, bring it forward to the town meeting, but have it here that we're doing the work that we're elected to do. Now, we as a group in the last 2 years have noticed that we've gone from 3 to 2 sections. We don't want to go to 1 section. There was even someone 6 months ago, that said to me on the board here that, well, Chatham Elementary has a different culture than Howard. I resent that. But let's assume whatever we can find that culture is. I don't think, again, Howard should be spending 75% of the money to assure whatever that culture is. So it's a team of 2 schools. And I am certain that no one on the original governing writing board meant to have a small school per grade per kids. Now, I recognize Chatham is a small elementary school with 200 youngsters, give or take. The other schools are pretty large elementary. I'm talking about classroom size. I'm sure that committee made certain that in the future, classroom sizes should be within 1 or 2 or 3 kids with some freakish stuff coming and going. Not any dramatic. To me, 12 youngsters in a Chatham elementary school in a 2nd grade, if they came to it in 18 and 19 in Howard, we would have a town meeting over that issue real quick. I don't want to throw some emotion into this, but we're just trying to get you boards of selectmen on the same knowledge level of what could possibly happen. And I disagree with Sharon to the extent that let's put it off for another year or 2, and then we'll address it then. I fully agree we need to market and continue to cause parents to understand what the issue could grow to. And by doing that, we'll have continued meetings. But at some point, the school committee, right now, if you read it clearly, it's simple enough to say the 2 elementary schools are the 2 elementary schools. And by the way, in 3 years from now, if all of a sudden the numbers really begin to be dramatically different, it would be this group to have parents going, what are you going to do about it? Have you had any discussions around this? What do you mean you can't, for a little money, just redistrict some Howard streets and make certain we have 15 in the class, 17, whatever that number tends to be? That's the solution. Because I don't want teacher revolution, and I don't want parent revolution. I guess what I want is resolution. So that's where I see the issue, and we're sharp to be talking about it now, because we've got 2 years of grace, then nothing's going to happen. Not next town meeting or even the year after, but we need to have something in this document that gives some discretion and judgment to the 8 people who are elected here, to say, let's get this option to the selectmen for next year, 2 years from now.
Have some new questions or some more, because we do have a couple other sections that we do really want to discuss with you. We have Mr. Howell and then.
Yeah, on a
Ms.
macro
Catherine.
level, I'm not alterably opposed to any of this text about the options and the mechanism. If there was a sentence that said, provided that any such changes made pursuant to this section are ratified by each town's Board of Selectmen and town meeting, it does not say that. And on a micro level, I have a kid in that elementary school, and I was wholly unaware of the process to change them over to Chatham. So this isn't a he said, she said thing to me. I'm not familiar with that process at all, and I actually would have been interested in it.
Ms. Kavanaugh.
Going back to the document and kind of getting off of the other discussion, there's one word in here that I want some clarification on. So I understand in terms of, deciding by town and by district, grade configuration. What is meant by curricular structure? That the schools could be broken up by curricular structure? So to see if I could get some additional info.
I'll defer to Mr. Carpenter on.
I presume it was our lawyers just trying to cover the bases on if there was.
I'm sorry, Scott, you need to speak up.
Yeah, I'm just presuming that it was our lawyer trying to cover the bases to say that that there, if it was sending all of the kindergartners and to one building, that it was covering that option. I think.
So, because I would think that would be covered by grade configuration. That's why that.
Science school.
I was thinking along the lines of
I
magnet.
doubt that we'll be a magnet school for.
Engineering.
This little lawyer-ese in there as well.
Yeah, but I think the wording was put in there to have that ability. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, so it might be a good word to just.
So moving forward with this particular section, I think it's something that we're also grappling with. We don't have a hard and fast answer. We have not voted as board. We do not have an answer for it. That's just, again, this is part of the conversation to get it moving and get public interest in it, especially following Mr. Carpenter's coffees that he had with parents and community members in the survey. So,
Can I say one more thing?
yes, Ms. Brown.
I don't think there's a rush to change this. Even though Mr. Russell is talking about, we need to let people know we're having a discussion, you've said twice, though, now, Terry, that we're not changing anything in the next year or two. So why change this? The discussion is already happening. Let's get a little bit more footing before we change the verbiage, is my thought.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the next section. We're going to try to finish this up in about 20 minutes so that we can have our regular business meeting. It's supposed to start at 7. So that's my goal.
The debt service 2 is really the big one.
The capital costs as well at the bottom.
It's really just debt service 2.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Carpenter's looking towards page 9. And the major change is at the top of page 9 under debt service. The first paragraph at the top is just removing unnecessary verbiage, and then also discussing about that this is for any new debt service, not any current debt service or debt service prior to July 1. So if you look down to number 2 under debt service, the major change there would be that the towns would be responsible for their individual elementary school instead of being based on enrollment figures. Basically saying that if Chatham Elementary School needs a new roof, Chatham would be the town of Chatham would be part of that debt service cost, and not based on the Harwich students and the Chatham students attending the building and dividing that up percentage-wise. And same goes with Harwich, yes.
If you want, I can try to
Yes,
explain
please.
it. So a concern that we have is that the way the current wording is in the document, there's the potential for gamesmanship to happen between, is this a capital project that happens out of the operating budget or a debt project? You know, should we borrow? Because it drastically impacts how a town, one town or the other might foot the bill. So if we just briefly look at a $100,000 roof project that happens on Chatham Elementary School, if it's a $100,000 roof project in the way the current agreement is going to read, and let's just, for simplicity, just say it's our students are split 75 Harwich, 25 Chatham, to make this easy. So if we do that, if it's a capital project, then Harwich picks up the bill for $75,000 of that roof, and Chatham's $25,000 of that roof. If it's debt, if we borrow, then Chatham is paying 80%, because there's roughly 80% of Chatham's population are Chatham kids, and Harwich is paying $20,000. So if we borrow, so you have, so you become in this little game on do we borrow or not. If we look on the other hand, a $100,000 roof on Harwich Elementary School, there are hardly any Chatham kids that go to Harwich Elementary School. As I said, I've been trying to keep the Chatham families in Chatham to keep Chatham going. So Harwich is going to pay for virtually all the roof if it's a borrowed thing, paying for all of their roof. Whereas if it's, if you're doing as capital, then Harwich is paying 75%, 25%. I think it would be more simplistic if we just sort of take the potential for gamesmanship out of it. Both towns own those elementary schools, and say, if there's a big project that's going to involve debt on the elementary schools, have the town go and pay for it. Just truth in advertising here. It does on some level disadvantage Chatham because at the moment, if there's a big project, Harwich is able to pick up some of that bill because there are Chatham kids, or there's Harwich kids, a portion of Harwich kids going there. Mm-hmm. I'd actually step back and look at it more altruistically. If something happens and there are more Harwich kids going there, that's actually, I would argue, if that's a direction that the towns or school committee or whomever makes that decision, I think that altruistic act is good for the Chatham kids. So I just think that it would be better off to have it read, whoever owns the building is going to take care of the debt for big projects on that building than the way the current agreement's reading.
Mr. Howell.
I'm probably going to shoot myself for saying this because Harwich actually benefits from that. But this is philosophically anathema to the other section, because if you do actually proceed with the K-1-2, or pre-K, K-1, they're performing different functions. They are no longer parallel elementary schools. They're more analogous to the middle school and the high school, at which point you'd be saying, okay, we'll take care of the high school because it's located in Harwich, and they'll take care of the middle school because it's located in Chatham. It's philosophically inconsistent with the other section that you rewrote.
And that would be a situation where, if that happens, again, that's not if the upper and lower elementary schools happen, it's not happening next year. It's a large cost anyway, so we're looking 2-3 years out. And if some sort of direction goes that way, we would revisit the regional agreement to say, look, this is the direction that we have gone with the schools. We then should look at the debt service because of X, Y, and Z. It was actually a conversation that we had, was whether or not to have any sort of, option in there in case of a reorganization of elementary schools. And the conversation that was had was basically, it's several years out, and therefore we could revisit it. We can revisit it next town meeting for May 2019. as needed if something happens.
I was just going to, for clarification purposes, so the taxpayers kind of look at us for why are we doing this. If you did that option where you had the two split elementary schools and the Chatham facility would need certain upgrades, I think you mentioned certain bathroom requirements and roof and whatever, so theoretically, we'd be looking for our Chatham taxpayers to be spending a certain sum of money on top of what they would normally do. So we would have to sell that to our taxpayers.
Bathrooms would end up in Harwich, but I understand.
Thank you for bringing Mr. Wortham to you.
Okay. And I think to get at what Don's bringing up, I mean, we could look towards having some clause that would add to this, that if there was a grade level configuration that would be handled the same way we handle debt on the middle school and high school, I think it does make sense. So I don't disagree with you.
I don't disagree with Don either. I think it's more logical, especially given the language that you seek elsewhere in the agreement that we just discussed. This would be actually at odds. I agree with Don that this would be at odds with that language. So I would think that going to the rolling average is probably the most equitable thing to do over time, whether it's today, tomorrow, whatever. But that's kind of the spirit of the agreement too. I mean, if you can't have it one way and have it the other, I think Don makes a very good point.
Any other comments or questions on debt or capital service?
You're striking E in its entirety, and even the new language?
The E, none of that was new language.
Because it looked like the stuff that was in red was new.
No, that was actually not new. That was all from the original agreement. I do not know why it was red. I apologize. That whole,
High school, middle school.
well, no, but it was in the original. It's red, even though it's not new language, it's
Right.
original language, even though it is red. Thank you. The number of iterations that we have gone through of edits, there's bound to be something of, we tried to keep it all the same two colors as well, because we had purple, green, blue, gray, so. Any other just general questions, comments, where we go from here?
If I may?
Please.
Just back to the first topic and Terry's last comment. I don't think anyone that spoke tonight will have a problem with the school committee doing what the school committee does. I think that the only problem that I heard and that I have is just come back to us. I think if we had a clause in there that you come back to each town and the towns then sell it to their town meetings, I just don't see what the difference is. I don't think anyone at this table is looking to saying, let us get involved in what you come back with. That certainly would be the superintendent and the school committee, and hopefully if it makes sense, you'll get support by boards of selectmen. But in the spirit of the original agreement and going into this, and I agree with Mr. Dykens that times change, but 4 years, not a lot of time has changed. So I think we, or I am asking that you just include us in the process after you make your decision and do your.
Thank you. Any, or else, any questions? Any of the topics that we've covered? Okay.
No, just as a comment, I mean, I think, it's interesting that there is a little kind of to cogitate on and consider changes on in the agreement that is now, 5 years old or 6 years old? So I just think it's kind of cool.
So the process for us for next steps, I believe we'll keep going through it. I think one of our goals was to come back to the selectmen in December at some point to start working on a final draft of what we would be presenting to you. So after our board approves, yes, you're going to correct me?
No.
Oh, okay. Come back to you in December or possibly even early January based on the holiday to be able to have what we feel would be the best fit for the region, for the regional agreement, to have you two boards wrestle with it and approve it to move it on to for the warrants for town meeting. Okay, Mr. Governor?
Just two quick points. I think one of the really nice outcomes of us coming together as a regional school district is that we are seeing more and more of our families sticking with us here. And, so the pressure to need to pull in kids from other communities to go and have this high school be filled with, at 700, we have enough kids that are at the kindergarten grade levels right now to have this building running at the capacity it was built for. And the nice thing is, we're tracking in a direction where each year, more and more of those families are seeing this is the place where they want to stay. So that's I think, good news for the regional school system and for the district. The other thing, just to completely clarify, nowhere in this conversation am I saying we're closing Chatham Elementary School or Harwich Elementary School, because I seem to keep getting a phone call a day about, I understand that somebody came and was giving away Chatham Elementary School to the select board in Chatham the other week. But we're going to need both buildings no matter what happens.
Want to get rid of it. See you soon.
All right, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn our workshop.
Second.
Second.
Second, all those in favor? All right,
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you very much.
thank you very much for all coming.
Times for you.
third reader that I invite into the study, and this is somebody who did a study on school choice in 2003, so mine kind of picks up where hers left off. She was excited to compete at Calder today.
Good evening. Welcome to the Monomoy Regional School Committee meeting of November 30th. We just finished our workshop with the Chatham and Harwich Boards of Selectmen and completed that, so now we're going to call our regular business meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. And the first order of business is approval of the November 9th minutes. Entertain a motion. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, additions, deletions, et cetera? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that's unanimous. Thank you. And the next order of business is public comment. Is anybody here for public comments? Seeing none, we will move on to Ms. Boyle with our student representative report from the high school. Hello.
Since it was not that long since I saw you last, my thing is kind of brief. But hello, as you know, I'm Grace Boyle, and I'm a senior at Monomoy. So right after my last speech, I went off to DC with Stand. It was incredible. The conference that we went to was really, really interesting and informative. We learned a lot about the legislation regarding the genocide in Burma and Yemen, and our main piece of legislation that we worked with was the Genocide Atrocities and Prevention Act. And so we went and we lobbied on Capitol Hill, which was really cool. We met with Congressman Keating and Senator Warren's staffers and Senator Markey's staffers. And one of the bills that we lobbied for was actually passed like the day after we went, which was really cool because we got to see that we made an influence. Also in DC, we got to see the Veterans Day ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. We actually got to see Mike Pence speak, which is, whether you're a fan or not, it's really cool to see someone that high up in government speak. It was funny seeing such a liberal political group at this, watching him speak. It was, yeah. We also visited multiple monuments, and we went to the Holocaust Museum, which was really, really cool. We can't thank Mr. Dixon enough for organizing that. National Art Honor Society also hosted its induction ceremony yesterday. 6 new members were inducted, ranging in age. There was, I think, 2 seniors and 1 junior, and then 3 sophomores. This group is extremely active, and we're getting ready to do our annual volunteering at the Baby Center in Hyannis. We do holiday crafts with the children there, so we're really excited about that. Key Club also hosted just tonight the Bog to Table dinner along with the culinary program. So the culinary program made dinner for the Key Clubbers and the Kiwanis, which is the sponsoring group for that. And the spread was awesome. It was Wellfleet oysters, and it was cranberry themed. We had brisket and potatoes. It was really awesome. Key Club is also getting ready this weekend to go to the Tufts Medical Center to visit the Kiwanis Pediatric and Trauma Institute. And we're going to bring our donations, and we get to see the open house, so we get to see what all of our hard work and donations actually goes towards. So that is very exciting. I think we have 8 students going to that. And that is it for me.
That is short, especially after the last one.
Yeah.
Any questions for Ms. Boyle? All right.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next time. All right, next up is our recognitions. Mr. Carpenter, Global Studies donations.
So I just want to first thank everybody that helped the Global Studies Gala get off the ground, and just want to acknowledge those that donated to the raffle that was at the auction that was at the gala, but also individuals who made donations that will help offset and defray the costs of the Global Studies trip this year. So Mr. Dixon, one of our teachers, provided a auction item of a 3-hour sail on Pleasant Bay. Pleasant Bay Community Boating had free membership in 2 lessons. Dolphin Whale Fleet Dolphin Fleet Whale Watch Tours provided 2 4-whale watch tickets. The Bernadette Waste Deck provided an original tile artwork. Bistro in Maine, a $75 gift certificate. professional family portraiteur, a professional photographer shooting, Wayside Inn in Chatham, 2-night stay, Mermaids on Main, a mermaid sculpture, Topmast Resort in Truro, a 2-night stay, 620 Brew House in P-Town, $100 gift certificate, Cat Smith's, a 1-hour photo shoot, the Hart Farm, $25 gift certificate, Cape Air, round trip for 2 to Nantucket, Cape Cotter and Hyannis, 1-night stay, Sativa, $25 gift certificate, Don Daly, maritime painting, and April Crichton Morris, an unlimited Uber for the day. And then some individual donations. We had David and Tyler Burton donated $200, Julia Carew, $35, Patrick and Betsy Casey, $200, Polly Dixon, $4,930, Mary Henry, $165, Tanya Hurley, $50, Lydia Ickley, $150, Tina and Bill Maloney, $200, Jean McNett, $250, Robert and Tricia Platten, $100, Lindy Rogers, $500, Amy Walensky, $50, Peter and Mary Wall, $200, and lastly, Tracy and Robert Yindra, $500.
Excellent. Can you remind us where the global studies trip is that they're hoping?
It's going to the Dominican, so this is
Right.
offsetting the cost of the trip of students to the Dominican Republic.
Excellent. Thank you very much for everybody's donations. All right, so then we move into our reports and discussions, and the first on the agenda item is the District Wellness Committee update with Mrs. McGuire.
Good evening, Melissa McGuire, Director of Student Services.
Coming alive slowly over there.
Get myself. There we go. So I'm here this evening to present an update on the District Wellness Committee. And first, I just want to explain what the District Wellness Committee is. It's a regulation that requires a district to have a wellness committee that's sole purpose is to review and make recommendations to the wellness policy and to develop goals for the district in relationship to that policy. We have an amazing group of members on the committee, stemming from administrators, teachers, students, parents, and community members, and school committee members. So we're very grateful for the large group that we have that comes together to support the District Wellness Committee. So our activities, starting last year, we actually established the committee, and then we reviewed and made recommendations for the wellness policy. And this year, we have drafted goals as a result of the policy. This is our schedule for the year, so we meet 4 times in the year. We've already had our first meeting where we developed our draft goals. So I'm going to just briefly show you, these are draft goals that we want to share with the school district, the administrators and teachers, and then be able to develop an action plan for them. The first was school meals, and the draft goal was looking at students being able to choose 3 out of 5 of the selections, 3 out of 5 of the days weekly, and then also to provide an after-school snack program. And what we'll do next is we'll develop data collection on how we're going to actually collect the data for those students that are selecting those food choices. Our next goal area is nutrition education and promotion. And here we want to provide teachers with resources where every student will receive minimally 1 lesson on healthy nutrition in every classroom at least once per year. And so one of the things that folks thought we should do is find out what is being taught now and what information teachers are using to provide healthy nutrition education, and then to be able to provide some lessons for the teachers. The third area is integrating physical activity into classroom setting. And this we kind of broke out in terms of students being able to have opportunities to engage in activity across the school day, And with students, which was nice of having students on the committee, is them really providing some input of what their ability to engage in physical activity, especially at the high school. So that was really interesting to listen to their perspective of what they're doing at the high school versus, can we get at the elementary level 20 minutes of collective activity per day, at the middle school at least 5 minutes of in-school activity, and then promotion of those activities outside of school. And the same with the high school. The high school students were incredibly articulate, talking about in their day, they don't even have time to have their day. So to then include, and they're walking from class to class, and they're engaged in JOSM, and they're engaged in sports and other activities outside of school. They felt it was not feasible for them to then add, time in their day to stop and engage in physical activity other than what they were already doing. So we appreciated their input. And finally, the last area was communication with parents. In the food service department, we're developing a quarterly newsletter for parents and students and, of course, staff that talks about healthy nutrition facts and information. And that will be developed and coming out in the next month or so. And then finally, looking forward, what we want to make sure we're doing is communicating with staff about our goals, developing a data collection procedure, monitoring the progress, and celebrating success. And that's where we are. So thank you so much, and if there are any questions?
Any questions? You were so thorough. You are good to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so we actually will get another presentation at some point later after the next meeting, or 2 or 3 a year we receive from you?
We will, yes. Yeah, we would like to report on actual goals and progress.
Okay. We'll see you then. Thank you. All right, next up on our agenda is the regional agreement discussion. And this is mostly on the agenda just to kind of recap our workshop for those who missed our must-see TV of our workshop from 5:30 to 7. We had a joint meeting with the selectmen, and we went through what our current draft is of the regional agreement and with some of the changes. And most of the changes in the regional agreement are verbiage and removing sections and paragraphs that dealt with the interim committee and prior to being regionalized. So after going through all of the basic stuff, we then went back and discussed the 2 to 3 more hot button items from the regional agreement that we're looking to possibly update and change. And one of those was the section on location and ownership of schools, discussing specifically the elementary schools in each town. Currently, the regional agreement states that there shall be no less than 1 elementary school in each member town. Students in elementary grades shall attend schools in their towns of residence, except in special cases as defined by the regional school committee. And there has been a lot of talk about the elementary school populations and how to kind of balance those, and if we need to balance those, and if we want to balance those. And so we, as a school committee, kind of came up with a starting point of a discussion, and that would more or less allow the school committee, I'm going to paraphrase instead of rereading everything, allow the school committee to assign elementary students to something other than their town's elementary school. And we probably spent the primary part of the workshop discussion discussing that portion and different challenges and questions and where to go with that. And so what we left with was that the selectmen want to focus on that and look at that more and kind of figure out where to go from there. Because ultimately our goal is to bring the updated regional agreement to the town meetings in May for approval, to at least clean it up, to remove portions that aren't necessary and add in some sentences. So that is by no means where the draft is in terms of this is what we want to do. It was purely a starting point of the conversation. And I think we had a really good conversation, and we'll come back to it, and our committee will wrestle with it some more, and we'll have more conversations with the selectmen. Anybody, anything to add on that portion? No help, huh? Okay. Then we also discussed the debt service section, and Mr. Carpenter went through and kind of explained that while the section on debt service is fine in the regional agreement, it could create a possibility where one town would prefer to do a debt service and the other town would prefer not to do a debt service for a larger project because of how they are charged. Is that a good summary?
Yep.
And so one of the conversations that we had was the possibility of having the elementary schools assessed solely by the town that they are in for debt service projects. And so that kind of actually circled back to the elementary school configuration conversation. So again, suggestions, it's not set in stone, it's just our draft of where we're at to come back to, but it was really great to hear their perspectives and to hear the conversations that they've had with families primarily and other people that have contacted the selectmen. So our next steps are to kind of finalize where we want to go with a draft of the regional agreement, because we ultimately need to approve a draft to present to the selectmen for them to review and hopefully approve to be able to move into the warrant for the town meetings. So we're going to look to kind of finalize that within the next month, hopefully, so that we can bring it to the selectmen. I don't know, we'd like to say December, but December seems to go like that. So probably early January, something along that lines. Okay, anybody add anything now? Just giving you time to think of something to add? No? All right. All right, so that was the regional agreement discussion. Unless anybody feels like we want to have a discussion based off of what the selectmen, I'm throwing you a bone, something. Nothing. Okay, so we will continue a regional agreement discussion some other point. Maybe they just want the meeting to go fast. Next up on our reports and discussions is the establishment of a revolving account. And I believe Ms. Isernio would like to talk to us about that, because I'm sick of hearing myself talk.
Katie Isernio, Business Manager. We have the need, as you know, we have some revolving accounts in this Mass General Law that allows the establishment of revolving accounts. And we have the need, which requesting to establish an extracurricular revolving account. And it will address things like the trip to the Dominic that the superintendent just made, in his recognitions on the donations and all that game. And then also on the next item on the agenda, we're going to be talking about the student activity audits, and there'll be some changes that we'll be making recommendation for that will speak to that as well. So what it will do is allow us to have this account set up, and that the funds will be deposited, and all the functioning of it will run through our financial software, which will make things a lot easier all around. So I don't know if anyone has any questions specifically about that.
Okay. Any question? They're just mute tonight. They don't want to talk.
I know, I like that.
So we would look to maybe have a vote to establish a revolving account at our next meeting.
I would respectfully request, because of the sensitive timing, if we could vote to establish an extracurricular revolving account this evening.
They might have to talk then.
All those in
Would
favor?
anybody care to make a motion to establish a revolving account for extracurricular activities? Mr. Duvall?
I move that we establish a revolving account for extracurricular activities in Monomoy Regional School District.
I'll second it.
Ooh, now they're jumping. We have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Arneo. And then I believe you're just going to stay up there and talk about our student activity audit as well?
I am. A couple of years ago, the Department of Ed came out with guidelines updated guidelines on the functioning of student activity accounts. And at the time, the policy subcommittee in 2015 worked really hard, and we created updated policies, and Tony put in your packets, just as a reminder to all of you, those updated student activity policies. Per the Department of Ed, all of your student activity accounts that are over $25,000 need to be audited by an outside firm every 3 years, and then annually internally. So even though our high school's the only one, we had the auditors come, a different auditing company, come and do all of them, just so we can have a good look at it. And as a result of the audit, and I don't have the draft for you because there was a section that needed to be modified and it just hasn't been done yet, so I'll give you a draft audit at the next school committee meeting. There's some recommendations and some changes, and I've been talking with some colleagues about how we might change functioning some of the student activities, and one major change will be, I believe, closing the elementary student activity accounts and using a revolving account instead, which was helping with this extra curriculum. But I just wanted to let you know that the audit was done. When you look at your policies, we've addressed a lot of the areas that need to be followed. We need to do some additional outreach and training to our principals and the administrative assistants that on the programs, but this is part one of a conversation that I'll bring to the group, because there'll be some recommended changes going forward. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that. Our ultimate goal is to have it all pulled in and run through the financial software and not in a checking account, as it's okay that it's in a checking account maintained by the principals and the administrative assistants at the high school and all the schools. We want to run it through the financial software that we have, and then I just think it makes it a little bit easier for all of us to reconcile.
Any questions on activities? All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And now we move on to the strategic planning update. In your packets, and we were given them in email, Mr. Carpenter forwarded a couple of quotes from Future Management Systems for two different levels of, lost the word, participation.
Targeted and streamlined.
Oh, what was the first one?
So there's a targeted strategic planning process that they gave us a quote of $20,000 to facilitate that, and a streamlined strategic planning process, and the quote was for $14,000.
Okay, thank you. So we had those quotes. We're still waiting to hear back from MASC with their possible options. Have you heard back from them?
Not as yet, no.
Okay, so we're still waiting to hear back from them. Something that I've kind of tried to stay very closely tied to is our school committee goals this year. And one of our goals was to work collaboratively with the superintendent and leadership team to develop the next strategic plan process by February. And our action steps were to discuss and decide upon school committee involvement by November. So being that this is the last day in November, we're going to discuss and decide upon a school committee involvement process of development for the strategic plan process. Because next month, which is December, it says to meet with the superintendent and administration team to begin the planning process. And one of my thoughts was that instead of us being a full committee to sit down to have this discussion, it seems like it would be more appropriate to create an ad hoc subcommittee, which would be just a subcommittee purely for the point of sitting down with the superintendent and his team to discuss what process would be fit, and then to come back to the committee to say, this is where we would like to go, and we have the full committee's approval as to the process that we have moving forward. Comments, questions? Ms. Depp?
Last I knew, and I may be wrong, so feel free to correct me, I thought we were talking about the process that we had in Chatham in 2010, inviting each group in each of the two towns to send a representative, so we'd have widespread, not picked by us, but picked by their own groups, people to be in this and try to replicate something like we had at that because it was so highly successful. And so I would be for either us doing this as a whole group or anyone on the school committee that has interest in it, meeting in an ad hoc group.
So where I was thinking, this is just my thought, and I don't get to make those decisions, you have to actually agree with me, is that if those who have interest, who actually want to make those, look through the different proposals, talk about the different options, look at the different, in this case, look at future management systems, and then hopefully MASC and their option, and say, okay, looking at those, this is what we would suggest. This ad hoc subcommittee would come back and say to us, this is what we would suggest as a strategic plan process for the district.
Well, what future
so-
management says is completely different than what I've suggested that worked before. This is more an a administrative type thing than it is involving, it's focus groups instead of a wide range planned out thing.
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit. Do we want to have this as a full committee discussion and discuss the process now and set up a time to meet in December to discuss and decide upon? Or do we want to have 2, 3, 4 of us sit down with the leadership team? You guys have to talk a little bit, something. Please, killing me over here. Mr. Russell.
I recommend the latter, that 2 or 3 volunteers here join the superintendent's leadership team for a couple of meetings to hash this out as what they see as the best route to go, and then come back with a recommendation.
Okay. Did we have other volunteers? I assume, Ms. Stout, you are very interested, and therefore
Yes,
you're volunteering
I
to be a
am. I
part
would
of that
prefer to do
subcommittee.
it as a large group of the school committee, but I'm willing to do it that way.
Any other ideas? We have one of and one against my ad hoc idea, so I need a little bit more involvement here. Ms. Sheehan?
I would volunteer, but I like the idea of the small group with a leadership team and decide where you want to go.
Okay, so I don't know, honestly, this is where my point of order is not very strong. Do we need to vote to approve a ad hoc subcommittee? Would that be,
Barbara would say yes.
I was going to say, I'm channeling my inner Barbara. Mr. Duvall?
I move that we develop and add a subcommittee of members to meet with Scott Carpenter's administrative team to review and propose what our next strategic planning will look like.
I would second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, I'm not opposed.
Are you in favor or are you opposed?
I'll abstain.
Okay, I haven't gotten there yet. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we have, how many ever 4 and then Ms. Stout abstaining? All right, so now that we have created said ad hoc, or a subcommittee, who would like to volunteer to be on said subcommittee? I had 2 volunteers, Ms. Stout and Ms. Sheehan. Somebody else? Don't all jump in. Oh, you know what? Ms. Long isn't here. This is the perfect time to volunteer her, right? That's, Mr. Duvall, would you like to join as well?
Well, if you think Mrs. Long would enjoy the committee.
I may never hear the end of that, so we best not do that.
Yeah,
Ms.
I'd
Stout.
be willing to. Yeah.
I think that we should have equal numbers from Harwich and Chatham, if we're going to do that.
Well, that's kind of funny because it was almost all of Chatham except for me, and I'm not volunteering. I have too many subcommittees and committees. Well, I'm not going to assign people to do something they don't want to do. So at the moment, we have 2 Chatham and 1 Harwich. Would a Harwich member,
How many times is the subcommittee going to meet?
presumably once or twice, my guess would be some point in December, and then possibly January, or maybe it says you're supposed to meet by December, but I think I could extend that meeting to January, even though the goal says December. I hear Mr. Crafty volunteering. So we have our 4. We have Ms. Stout, Ms. Sheehan, Mr. Crafty, and Mr. Duvall. Thank you very much. So you guys can figure out a time to sit down. and meet. Any other questions or comments, concerns? Okay. All right, then we will move on to our second reading of the abundance of policies that we had last week. I'm not sure if they're going to be in that order or my order, but we will start with the staff conduct policy, which is GBEB, George Bravo, Edward Bravo. Does anybody have any questions? And these were posted online. Thank you very much to Mrs. McGuire and Ms. Jordan for getting those on the website so that they were available. I believe even late Thursday night they were put up, so shortly after our meeting 2 weeks ago. So they were available for review. Any questions on the staff conduct policy? Would anybody care to make a motion to approve said staff conduct policy?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Duvall. Thank you, Mr. Russell. You tried, Mr.
I
Crafty.
did, that's all I'm doing for
The
today.
cat. I got it done. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That would be unanimous. Then we have the safety program policy, file EB, Edward Bravo. Any questions, discussion? Anybody care to make a motion? Mr. Craffey?
Motion to approve this.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous as well. We move on to the staff ethics conflict of interest policy, GBEA, George Bravo, Edward Alpha. Mr. Kraft, a motion?
Motion to approve.
Any second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. And then we move on to policy, staff participation in political activities policy, file GBI, George Bravo Indigo. Mr. Craffey, a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'm going to get you to talk, yeah. Any second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Policy, the student records policy, file JRA, Junior Robert Alpha. Mr. Craffey?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, wait.
Point of order, there are two in that?
That is just JRA and not JRAR.
JRA-R.
So can we do them separate?
You can, or you do them together?
I had them separate on my list. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. So we had the motion and the second. Can we please revote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Can we move on to the second student records policy, which is file JRA-R, Junior Robert Alpha-Roberts. Mr. Cracken?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. And our final policy of the evening is the tobacco use on school premises by staff members policy, file GBED, George Bravo Echo David. Mr. Kraft?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous as well. Thank you very much. And our next report and discussion is a update on the CVEC agreements. Mr. Carpenter, would you care to?
Sure. So
Summarize.
CVEC, for those who are newer on our committee, is the Cape and Vineyards Electric Cooperative. The school district has opted to engage with CVEC for a couple of different projects where we are essentially buying energy from them, green energy from them, and saving the school district money in the process. So you could think of it that we could put solar arrays on a roof of a building, or we could be involved with a project that buys the electricity off of a solar array that's been put on a landfill. or that we're buying electricity as we do. We have some of the electricities coming off of projects that are on landfills. We also have engaged with them to be buying some of the energy that's produced by some of those wind turbines in Wareham. So in order to be good partners with CVEC, they had in previous years looked at their financials and realized that in order for them to remain a vibrant partner of helping different municipal groups in the Cape and Islands, that having a small adder would allow them to have some additional funding to support their mission. And in past years, we have approved this adder that helps them help us. So they provide in page 4 of the packet Monomoy's share of the adder. We're essentially giving up $601.04 as part of this partnership. In terms of that adder, I recommend we continue to be good partners with CVEC, and there is a proposed motion in the packet that would have us continue being partners in the adder program with them.
Thank you very much for doing that, because I could not have done that. Does anybody have any questions about our CVEC agreement? It is possible if somebody would care to make a motion for extending this agreement if they'd like, or we can sit on it and wait until our next meeting. It's kind of up to you.
Vote.
I hear a motion from Mrs.
Yes.
Richardson.
The Monomoy School District wishes to extend the memorandum of agreement for the Round 1 operational administrative adder previously agreed to honor before March 2017. The adder paid to CVEC for management of the Round 1 projects will continue to be at 0.005 per kilowatt hour of production. The extension of the memorandum of agreement for the Round 1 operational administrative adder of 0.005 is to be for 1 year, with a duration extending from July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2019.
In a second.
I would second it.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Mr. Duvall.
On the worksheet, it says 0.0025 adder, but in the template it says 0.005. Question number 1. And question number 2, does this replace what we voted on last year and not add to it?
It's supposed to be a continuation of what we did last year. But if we need, I can get clarity, because I notice on page 4 that there is both a .0005 on the top half of the grid and you're correct, that a different one. So why don't we hold, and I'll reach out to Liz Argel and get clarity without a presentation.
That's very good eye, Mr. Duvall. Thank you. So I believe we need to have Mr. Russell withdraw his second, and Mrs. Richardson, or actually Ms. Richardson, if you could withdraw your motion. I'm channeling my inner Barbara.
So seconds withdrawn.
Thank you. So we'll put this back on the agenda for the next meeting. All right. Good try, Mrs. Richardson. All right, so then we will move on to our subcommittee reports. Seeing none, we will move on to Mr. Carpenter's superintendent reports.
I'll get to the elementary reconfiguration survey and just sort of the final results on that, but I'll do this in sort of reverse order. In your packets, there is one page, front and back, on a little summary of State Auditor Suzanne Bump's recommendations when it comes to regional school districts. What I'll be doing between now and when next we meet is writing a letter to our legislators, encouraging them to support the proposal or the recommendations by by Auditor Bump. In large part, she's saying that if the state wants to encourage regionalization, then they have to acknowledge the incentives. And really the only long-term incentive for regionalization out there is the transportation funding that school districts are supposed to get. And ideally, the transportation is supposed to be funded at 100%. The state should be paying 100% of the regional school district's transportation costs. But that they fall short of that. They're in the 73-ish range, Katie? The transportation, 64. So her recommendation is that the legislature really step up and fund regional transportation to encourage, both to support the school districts that have already regionalized, but also to encourage other forms of regionalization throughout the state. I think I forwarded an email to you inviting this committee and our select boards to hear Auditor Bump talk about her recommendation. She will be at Dennis Sharmuth High School in their auditorium December 6th, 10:30 a.m. till noon to talk about this. So if you have the opportunity to join and listen, you can be more knowledgeable, and you too can write a letter to our legislator. All right. I'll be quick with this because this is the same presentation you saw, just ever so minorly changed percentages. So when last we spoke, the survey was open. The survey, if you go to the link now, it'll pop up saying, thanks for your interest, but the survey's closed. We had 453 people responded. We sent out 3 different invitations to our families to take part in the survey. We also sent it out through the Early Childhood Council to get families that aren't yet with us, that have young children. There was a one-pager that obviously this is too small for you to see, but with our Vice Chair's support and editorial guidance, we were able to come up with a nice one-pager.
Just a quick question, about what percentage is that 453 responses?
I think for our families, it's probably about 1 in 5 families, but it's hard, presuming that only one parent were to respond, so it could be less than that. We might have heard from both father and mother, and but roughly 1/5 of our families, I'm guessing, responded. But this one-pager was essentially embedded in the survey. So if you went to the survey, you were exposed to this information so that you could, hopefully when you're taking the survey, make some sort of informed choice. In terms of the survey, when I last spoke at our last school committee meeting, the percentages of Chatham responding to the survey was 24%, Harwich 62%, and then Choice 13%. In the last, since we had the presentation, there was a concerted push over the last week and a half from families in Chatham, so there's slightly more Chatham families have responded to the survey. In terms of were you not a member of staff, so for the survey on the 17th, 87.6% of the respondents weren't members of the Monomoy staff. We've seen since the last time the survey was put out there that slightly more staff members have responded. So the final has 82.8% are not staff, and then the others are staff members. When we go through, we'll look at how staff respond, how Harwich families respond, how Chatham's families respond, and how Choice families respond to the options. In terms of those that are responding, we see that 9.9% of those responding to the final survey don't have kids in the system. Almost 10% of the respondents actually are families that are as yet to be with us. 58% of the families have children at the elementary age, and so we're seeing, the bulk of the respondents are ones that this survey is really impacting. It's those at the elementary level, or those that will be at the elementary level. 17.2% of the respondents have kids in Monomoy, but not at the elementary level anymore, and then 14.8% don't have children in the system, past, present, or future. In terms of just the overall of the 453 responses, to have no reconfiguration, to have the status quo to continue, a quarter of the respondents said that that's what they would prefer. A third of the respondents said that they would prefer to see redistricting, and the way we described it is essentially to have a bus worth of students that currently head to Harwich Elementary, head to Chatham Elementary, to provide a little balance in terms of the size of the building, to bring Chatham Elementary up to 3 sections per grade level, and to bring Harwich Elementary down to 5 sections per grade level. In terms of how our staff responded, our staff, 90% of the staff were indicating that they would favor some sort of change, and of that, 69% indicated that they would most like to see a redistricting that would be, the option 3 was one that had us looking at upper and lower elementary schools to see all kindergartners in the same school together, all first graders in the same school together, which has educational benefits from the ability to collaborate with colleagues and to align your curriculum. Also has advantages for the kids in terms of social emotional exposure. They have a larger peer group from day one, more opportunities to find other children that have like interests. And just a quick one there. Chatham Elementary School and Harwich Elementary School staff, when I pulled out them and looked at them, they had very similar, they were in very similar places, although only about 60% of both the elementary staff were for that third option. A few more of them were for just the simple shift of bus. From the Chatham families, more of the Chatham families favored the status quo. They don't change anything more than the other 2 options, although 58% did indicate that they'd favor some sort of change. Harwich, very different. Harwich families, 77% indicated they'd favor some sort of change, with the mode being at that third, have upper and lower elementary schools. And for our choice families were similar, with even more of them favoring upper and lower elementary schools.
Thank you for the update on the results. Any questions, Mr. Carpenter, about that survey? Very quiet.
Follow up
Mr.
with
Russell.
Scott. Did our boards of selectmen members receive this document this evening?
I believe everyone took one.
Good. A lot of clarity, information. Thank you.
Anything else for your report?
That would be it.
Wow.
Trying to meet that 8 o'clock deadline.
Apparently. You're so text Justin real quick. Hold on. All right, so we will move on to our final action, or our final item, which is action items, and the only thing left on that is disposal of surplus equipment. And I think Mrs. Long will be very disappointed to not have to do this, so who would like to take her place this evening? Mr. Crafty, I see your hand just...
No, thank you.
Wow! Mr. Duvall, thank you.
I move that we declare as surplus equipment from the central office, outdated AEDs, 6, and outdated AEDs, Zoll, number 1. So a total of 7 AEDs.
Thank you. And a second, anyone? Anyone?
I would second that.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. And just to clarify, it does say to be returned to company for a trade-in rebate to be used to purchase additional AEDs. Ms. Isernio, oh, thank you.
So what we will do first, once the committee, if you so choose to declare them surplus, I will first, per our policy, reach it back to the 2 towns, to the EMS delivery systems in both towns to see if they're interested in the surplus AEDs, and offer them to both of them, and if they choose to have them. Otherwise, we will be able to return anyone back and get a rebate towards the purchase of another AED.
Excellent. Any questions?
Just for my own clarification, an AED is?
Automatic, it's electric, automatic electric defibrillator.
Starts your heart.
Okay, thank you.
You know, when you
He's
walk
still
into
my
the building. Exactly.
No, actually, unstill your heart, right?
Yes, as a corrective.
All right, any other questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And that is unanimous as well, which leads us to letter J, which is adjournment. Mr. Craffey, would you so move?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And we have adjourned at 7:55 PM. Thank you very much.